Okay, welcome to the stream, ladies and gents. And something absolutely enormous has just happened in the last few hours. And I'm amazed. I was looking on the BBC and some of the other news broadcasters that they're not even mentioning this. It's as if it hasn't even happened. At least they've got the other big story of the day, though, which we'll go on to. In fact, the other story is mind-blowing that it's actually happened. You'd have thought a day after the pages, they might have figured out that there's also radio. So anyway, we'll get into all of that. But let's start with the biggest story of the day. This is absolutely huge news. Let's go over to the shared screen now. So a drone strike on a Russian arsenal has just created the largest explosion of this entire war. They say that the explosion is 5 miles wide. This is the area that's just been hit. It is a Russian arms depot. Let me play the clip here. Look at this. In fact, so I don't get censored, let me turn the sound off. This is enormous. It gets bigger and bigger. It's like a mushroom cloud going off here. And it spreads all around. It's a 5-mile area. It's absolutely huge. Let me get into some of the details then. So this was a drone strike then on a Russian stockpile. At first, a fire started as a result of falling debris from a drone that was repelled by air defense forces. The blast declared a partial evacuation due to the large blast and surrounding fires. Someone didn't write this article very well. Social media video showed a huge fireball erupt against the night sky. The above video was likely taken 2 kilometers away or more. This was the largest explosion of the entire war, and there's widespread speculation that it was a missile that hit the ammo storage site. They are saying that they don't believe that this was a drone. People believe this was a missile, and they claim they have evidence for it. But we'll see. And the reason this would, I mean, I haven't even mentioned this, but the reason this would, if it was a missile and not a drone, i.e. a long-range missile, and you've got to see the location of this. It's not as if it's on the border or something. It's deep within Russia. If this was one of these long-range missiles, and we'll get on to what NATO chief has said as well, this could, I know you love this headline, this could change everything, or this slogan, in this conflict. I mean, this is absolutely crazy what has happened. I want to show you what they think was stored at this site as well. This was an area 13 square kilometers or 5.2 square miles. That is how big this was. The site corresponds with the location of the Russian Defense Ministry's main missile and artillery arsenal. It's situated 488 kilometers northeast of Ukraine's border. So again, this isn't just on the border here. It is hundreds of miles deep within Russia. If this is true, then Moscow is likely to view such a major attack so deep into Russia as having a NATO hand behind it. So here's what's interesting. What we tend to notice with conflicts and events like this is when, you remember the stories I covered last week, and I sort of explained that this is leading up to Biden is really the sign-off, although we know Biden doesn't sign stuff off, but he was the sign-off. Everybody else had approved the long-range weapons, everyone. And then Keir Starmer tried to influence Biden to sign it. David Lammy signed it off. He did his speech and everything on it. And then it was Biden, remember the video, who had that piece of paper and read off a statement. Who gave him the piece of paper? We don't know. But he read off a statement saying that he was not going to do it. Well, here's my theory on it. If this was a missile, because at the moment we're just going to assume, and we're going to go with the story that it was a drone, it was debris from a drone. I'm not convinced by it, I've got to be honest, that because it's saying some of these missiles were deep underground, how would a drone just exploding, even if it has explosive on it, just somehow penetrate the ground in these bunkers. I'm not buying it at this point, but I will look into it more and see. But I'm just going with a narrative that we are hearing at the moment. But if this is true, that it was a drone, then okay, that's one aspect of the story. But here's my point with the whole Biden thing and everything else. Sometimes when people don't sign off on things, because he was the last hurdle and he didn't sign off on it, there are other interested parties that will find a way to still do these things. So maybe, and again, I'm just throwing this theory out there, I'm not saying it's a fact, okay, maybe that there was a missile that went in, maybe it was a missile strike. Who authorized that or how it occurred, I don't know. But if that's true, this is really going to cause a major escalation in this conflict. So just something for you to think about here. Again, I'm not saying this is a fact, just a thought that I had around it. So what has Putin said then? He said last week it's become clear that NATO countries assist with targeting and that its satellites and coordinating systems must be involved in such attacks. Kyiv owned up to the attack. Obviously, they did instantly with a government statement saying that Ukraine's forces launched a strike. Russian state media has been quiet about the details or the confirmation, and they're doing an investigation at the moment. This was a highly sensitive facility, deep underground bunkers, etc., etc. That's why I'm not quite buying this whole drone story, although it could be true. AP has quoted a Ukrainian source saying the depot housed Iskander and Toka-U missiles, as well as glide bombs and artillery shells. This big overnight cross-border attack came amid a broader wave that included possibly hundreds of UAVs. Russia's defense ministry said it shot down 54 of them. Now, look at this. Hold on, I've got to show you this as well. The size of this cloud. Look at this. Look at the size of this thing. It is absolutely, it's blocking out the sun. It's so huge. It just goes on and on and on. It's enormous, 5 square miles. And this is what the NATO chief then had to say. He actually approves, so he was one of the people pushing for Biden to sign it off. So he approves of the long-range missiles. Jens Stoltenberg has addressed the question of the US and UK mulling allowing Ukraine to strike Russian territory with Western-supplied long-range weapons. Putin last week spelled out clearly that if this happened, then Moscow and NATO would be in a state of direct war. Stoltenberg downplayed this threat of a major new escalation in a Monday interview. This was with LBC, saying he welcomed the discussion over the long-range missiles, and he's in favor of the West green lighting these strikes on Western soil. Well, he's about to leave, so he won't really have any impact of this since he's about to leave the post. But strangely, he seemed to admit the potential for nuclear-armed confrontation. This is what he said. So far, we haven't seen any changes in there. So this is Putin or Russia, nuclear posture that would require any changes from our side. He said, while acknowledging there won't be any winners in a nuclear war. Asked about possible Russian retaliation, he said there were no risk-free options in the war. But I continue to believe that the biggest risk for us, for the UK, for NATO, will be if Putin wins in Ukraine, is what he said. So this was the interview he did then. Moving over to another article that's just come out on Ukraine, is talking about this demographic nightmare that Zelensky has been talking about. I'll get into a couple of the details of this here then. After 2.5 years, figures are starting to emerge on the actual death toll of the war in Ukraine. The figures are not only devastating, but they also come at a time when the country is facing a historically low birth rate. Now, they seem to be focusing this on Ukraine, but as I've talked about a lot of times, this low birth rate isn't just in Ukraine. It's pretty much any developed country. The countries that we are seeing a high birth rate are African nations, Middle Eastern nations, even some South American nations. But you look at the US, you look at Canada, you look at the UK, you look at Western Europe, you look at Australia, New Zealand, you look at any of these, Japan collapsing, you look at any of these Western very high GDP per capita countries, and the birth rate is collapsing across all of them. And it gets even deeper than this. I know I did a sort of documentary on this a while ago in the Patreon community, but it gets very deep and very dark as well, because it brings in all sorts of other things. There's issues with food, there's issues with medications, there's all sorts of other things that are going on here. It's worth looking into. It's a very serious problem. So I just want to add that point. It's not isolated to Ukraine. Just yesterday, the Wall Street Journal reported that some 1 million soldiers either died or have been injured. 1 million. It gives no estimate for dead or injured civilians. Ukraine is undoubtedly facing a catastrophic demographic crisis, having already suffered a population loss in the wake of Russia's annexation of Crimea. There were still around 40 million Ukrainians living in Ukraine before Putin invaded, versus a census reported 48 million in 2001. So quite a large drop then. However, you have the UN data now showing 6 million people have since fled due to the war, and with additional territories occupied by Russian forces, the actual Ukrainian population may be between 25 and 27 million. However, there's other research that puts it at about 29 million, but that is about the peak. We're not seeing anything much higher than that at the moment. So we've gone down from, or they have gone down, should I say, from around 48 million down to about 29 million people now. So a huge drop actually across the country. 3 times as many people died as there were births in the first half of this year. Now, that's actually not surprising. This tends to happen in periods of war. The demographic crisis has reportedly had a serious impact on Zelensky's war strategy, as former Ukrainian officials have stated that one of the reasons Zelensky refuses to mobilize men between the ages of 18 and 25, who are a key age group for the military in any war, is because most of them do not yet have children. If they are killed or permanently injured at the front, experts say it would seriously damage Ukraine's future demographic prospects. I want to move over then to this new thing that's just taken place. So we talked about this yesterday. These were the explosives in the pages and what actually had taken place there. They put explosives, we're finding more details now, inside 5,000 of these Taiwan-made pages. Now, a little bit more context to the story, because the media doesn't go into this aspect, but when I did the research on the Taiwanese company, they'd actually put out a statement. The media, for some reason, isn't publishing this statement, that says that they didn't actually produce the pages. They licensed a company in Budapest to produce these pages. So they're saying, we didn't produce the pages. It was we licensed it out to another company, and we're sort of getting the blame. So that is an aspect they're not really talking about. But Mossad has said, or they've indirectly said, yes, they got hold of them. They put 3 grams of plastic explosives into them. And this was months ago, and then they did this detonation remotely. So that's sort of bringing you up to speed on it. 9 people have been killed, 3,000 more have been injured. So there are actually 5,000 of them that they put the explosives in. Now, you would think, you would think a day after that Hezbollah would have said, hold on a second here. All of these pages just exploded. Well, at a similar time, we bought all these handheld radios. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm looking too much into this, but maybe if all of our pages have just exploded, well, we bought these radios at a similar time. Maybe we should take these handheld radios and, get rid of those and get some new ones. No, I guess that didn't cross anyone's mind, because today, not long ago, the same thing just happened. They just blew up all of these handheld radios. So now there's even more casualties. The hospitals are completely overwhelmed at the moment. This is a serious, serious incident, which is still going on. Actually, it is ongoing. They were bought at the same time as the pages 5 months ago. Again, why they wouldn't think that, I don't know. It's quite unbelievable. And then last story then, this is out of Euronews. Brussels is deducting 200 million euros as a fine from Hungary's EU funds, as Hungary is refusing to allow migrants to come into the country. Here's a quick report on it here.
The European Union has begun the process of deducting a 200 million euro fine from Hungary. She was fined by the EU's top court for breaking the bloc's migration rules by depriving migrants of their right to apply for asylum.
When it comes to the 200 million euro fine, the 15-day deadline expired yesterday. That means that the Commission is, in accordance with the applicable rules, moving to what we call the offsetting procedure.
So I think this is going to be very interesting as to what Orban does next. I'm pretty sure what his next move is going to be, because we covered that a couple of days ago. I think he's going to, any migrants that cross the border, I think he's going to bus them to Brussels, as they've threatened to do. I think this is going to become a very, very hot topic. It's going to become very interesting to see what happens here, because it's not just Hungary, but Poland are starting to do some things as well. Germany are starting to look at measures. This is getting very interesting indeed. I'm going to obviously continue to monitor the situation, as with all of these stories. Tomorrow, we should have good weather for the walk and talk, so it should be a good one. Apart from that, thank you for being a subscriber here. Take care. God bless you and your families, and I will see you tomorrow.